Hey everyone, welcome to Bright and Early, the podcast for people building early stage startups. I'm your host, Brian Ray. I talk to entrepreneurs, product people, designers, and marketing pros about their experiences during the early days to help you feel just a little less crazy. My guests today are Marie Poulin and Ben Borowski. They are the creative force behind the digital services agency Doki, and they are also the creators of Doki, a product that allows creators to offer courses, training, and mentoring programs online. Marie and Ben, welcome to Bright and Early.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, hello.
It's my pleasure. This will be fun. This is the first time I've had two guests on at the same time. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves and why the both of you are on?
Together, we're Doki. Marie and I are consultants first and foremost. I've been doing the independent consulting since 2010, and I think Marie started a year or two before me. And when I immigrated to Canada in 2014, we afterwards decided to kind of join forces, and that was when we became Doki.
Yeah, so I was handling most of the sort of design and marketing side and strategy work, and Ben was doing a lot of the programming and development. So it just kind of made sense to kind of merge forces. So we sort of thought we'd work on projects together, but what ended up happening was actually it was almost like running two separate companies under the same umbrella, which we didn't really expect, but we just sort of leaned toward different types of projects and different types of clients. So even though we are one entity, Doki, we kind of operate like two different businesses.
Are there benefits to that that you're protecting and keeping, or is it just kind of the way that it continues to go?
A little bit of both. I think the main benefit for us and just the way that we work is that we tend to have quite flexible roles in terms of what we do. I will sometimes do a bit of design because I have a background in design as well, but most of the work I do is programming. But we do have these very clear strengths that each of us you utilize. And I think that because I'm very programming focused and Marie's very design and strategy focused, we tend to be able to work kind of side by side without stepping on each other's toes a lot. But we always defer to the other person for certain topics, and we're very respectful of what our strengths are. So I think that they kind of just reinforce each other. So, when Marie needs a deeper understanding of some kind of technical thing, then she can reach out to me for help. And if she, vice versa. So if I'm looking for a kind of UX or a strategic thing, or we need to collaborate on how we might bill a certain customer, or how our scoping works. So we each kind of run our own projects, but we use each other to make sure that we're making the right moves for the business together, because at the end of the day, all the revenue goes to the same source. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's not hard for us, but we are. We didn't really say this at the beginning, but we are married as well. So it's kind of a reflection of our partnership as well, and the way that we work together.
But you all were not married when you originally formed Doki. Do I have the timeline right on that?
That's correct. We were. It's funny. we were a couple at the time, but we weren't married.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm honestly, and I like to joke, and I think a lot of people joke about a business partnership is actually a little bit more serious than a marriage in a lot of ways. And so when we first did that, we committed basically at that point. We were like, yeah, we're in this together for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. If you've run a business together for 1 year, that's like 5 years of dating.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So do you? I'm kind of curious about this part of running the services agency, and each of you having your own strengths where you could kind of operate it in those strengths. Do you collaborate on the proposal and sales side, or how does that all work?
Yeah, typically we sort of have a bank of standardized templates that we use for a lot of our projects. Some standardized proposal things, some standardized contracts, and we have a whole bunch of different agreements. A lot of that stuff came from the legal side of stuff came from when I was running my business. I had a whole little portfolio of contract templates and things like that. And then Marie and I both have kind of a different way of ideating and doing research for potential clients and things like that. So we tend to have our own proposal templates that we fill out, and then we kind of use one of those templated contracts to tack it on at the end that makes it, and then we build it into one of our designed templates so it feels more like a company thing, but we tend to have our own styles for proposing. I think Marie tends to be a little bit looser in her in the way that she structures her projects, and I'm incredibly rigid, and I like to get very very detailed on scope and functionality and things like that. But one thing I've actually been doing lately is that has allowed me to be a little more fluid with my proposals and scoping is adapting some of Marie's style of doing paid roadmaps before you start in on a full-size project. Allows you to get paid to do that scoping stuff, because for years I've spent 2-3 days at a time doing research and writing proposal and getting all that, getting that domain space knowledge together to really convince the client that, they should hire you to do this, $100,000 project or whatever. And a lot of, for some of those larger projects, it's pretty costly investment.
Preach.
Yeah, and then if you don't get the project, you've spent how much time?
Yeah.
And I think because of my tendency to be a little bit more loosey-goosey and kind of let's see where this project takes us and where it evolves, I think I needed a way to give my projects room to grow, but still be very structured. So the road mapping was a chance to say, here's what I'm noticing. Here are the many unknowns and the places where I think there might be scope creep. And it's a chance to kind of identify them first before diving into a project. And then that way I'm kind of building that fluidity into my projects, which I really like, because I think it's almost impossible to, quote on a large project without things just taking left turns and changing. And as new information becomes available, adding this other feature will actually make this project so much better.
Yeah, it's right
so
for the, yep, right for the
know
project.
that. Right?
Yep. Yeah. So along with, you've got Okie Doki, digital services agency, and you all are talking through common scenarios that people in that area, in that business are dealing with. You also have Doki, a SaaS product. So talk to us a little bit about that and how you're running that.
Yeah, that sort of evolved from, we were looking at a way to help me streamline some of the work I was already doing with clients. So a lot of the people I was working with tended to have some kind of online course, or they were running group programs. And we noticed that the people that had the biggest budgets and the people that were really seeing a lot of success in our work together already had these other sort of hybrid business models. They weren't just service providers. They weren't just product providers. They were kind of doing a little bit in between. So we started seeing this opportunity, like how could we streamline all of this, custom integration work that I was doing and, hooking up PayPal or Stripe or whatever. It was a time-consuming process. And so Ben was like, we could build our own. And we sort of kind of laughed about it at first. And then we thought, well, actually, maybe there is something here. Maybe we should try this.
Yeah. Actually, the catalyst for that was a little bit before that, when Marie spent a year after I first immigrated to Canada. She spent a good deal of time launching a mentorship program for designers called Digital Strategy School. And for a year or two, she ran this program, and it was really quite successful. And one of the things that she was struggling with was maintaining the content and being able to distribute it. And because it was a sort of a cohort-based system, we started thinking about ways to, relaunch the program without having to, do a bunch of programming and stuff like that.
How do I manage all these different students and spreadsheets? And
so we had this, this problem of our own. And also we were starting to see these opportunities for helping other customers. Because at this time there was kind of the beginning of the courses gold rush, so to speak. So we were seeing all these people that are coming to us and saying, gotta have a course. And I often talk about it in relation to 2008, 2009, when the first iPhone came out, and everyone, when I was doing consulting for iPhone apps at the time, every single client was like, we got to have an iPhone app. And I would say, what for? And they wouldn't really have an answer for that. And I think that, early on in that course thing, it was like, we got to have, it's all about courses now. Got to have
this guru told me I needed a course, but they didn't even know what problem they were solving.
So we started having that with our clients where every single one was like, I need a course. And, there was no real rhyme or reason for why they needed it. It was just something that they'd heard about and seen a couple of successful large scale entrepreneurs doing this kind of info product type thing, like Nathan Barry and Marie Forleo, and these types of customers who already have these quite significant audiences.
Large audiences. Yeah.
And so people started coming to us as, as Marie was building her own course, and we started working on this platform to kind of help ourselves and see if we could develop a thing ourselves. People started seeing us as these course experts, which technically we really weren't. Like we didn't know the first thing about curriculum design, and we were basically building software that solved the need. So that was kind of the origin story of Doki. And we essentially funneled, while Marie was shipping this digital strategy school course, the funding mechanism for me spending most of my time on this product was the revenues from her course sales. So I took a break on consulting for a bit. And I think it was for about 3 months, I was kind of going half speed on the software and doing a little bit of client work. I had a contract with a company in San Francisco that would just I was basically a retainer, but that was eating up about half my week. And the other half I was tinkering on Doki, doing some experiments, and we kind of weren't getting anywhere with it. And in terms of having a product to be able to show people to get traction. And so we made the decision at the beginning of the next year that I would go full time on it. And then so we basically had saved up that money from Marie's course stuff. And that allowed me to spend full time 6 months on it. And then we shipped it mid that year.
Okay.
So that's
go ahead. No,
I'm finished.
Okay. So that's how you were able to manage the resource allocation piece of, is that the services business is doing extremely well. You're seeing patterns, you're seeing this need, you're seeing demand anyway. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of slice off a bit. Can you talk just a little bit more about, in hindsight now, seeing that time management wise and everything does it continue to feel like that was the right move at the time? Do you wish you had gone a little bit more all in? Are you comfortable with the degree of resources and time that you put into it? How are you managing that now? What's that like?
I think the progressive approach is a really good idea. We've done that. We've made this mistake a number of times throughout our business where we say, this is the thing that we're 100% focusing in on, and we go all in on it. And we talk about this a lot, where we shut off the taps of other revenue sources. So, at one point, I think Marie decided that she wanted to do a different course. And so we shut off the taps of the digital strategy school thing. And then we also shut off the taps on my consulting stuff at some point to focus on Doki. So there was some really grindy months there where Doki hadn't really established any kind of revenue yet. And Marie was doing some light client work, but not much.
I was feeling pretty stretched during that point too. I think because, Digital Strategy School was doing well, that's where the revenue was coming in. But then seeing that Doki had been launched and then realizing it's not if you build it, they will come. Now we actually have to hustle and get people on. But because we were services people and we were always flush with projects, with clients finding us, we'd never really had to do any kind of active marketing or outreach. So I think this was really the first time it was sinking in for us that we didn't have a plan to market it. We didn't really know. Yeah. We couldn't only rely on word of mouth. So I was like, crap, I'm going to have to shift gears in some capacity to start doing this work and getting our stuff out there. So instead of doing this slowly, I was like, I'll just shut off this thing over here and shift gears. And it was like, well, crap, now neither of us has a full-time income. How are we going to do this? So I would have done that very, very differently. I would have done that much slowly. Yeah. But I sort of felt like I was stretched and we needed to do something to start getting the word out.
Mm-hmm. So what are some tactics that you all tried during that time? I'm thinking pay-per-click or content marketing, social, anything that you found as you started testing that out that you found to be super effective, something that you wish you had done quicker? Or
I mean, we never really did any sort of marketing campaign. Our entire operation was word of mouth and just...
And you get like podcast interviews and lots of word of mouth. Podcast interviews actually led to one of our best paying...
Yeah, some of our initial revenue
years.
jumps for us were when we were featured on the Divi podcast. So getting into these markets where there are a lot of people that are doing work for other customers. So a lot of our early stage customers, and still to this day, are people who are doing service-based work for other customers.
Like a lot of web designers who are putting websites together for people who have an online course, and then they're trying to figure out, how do I help my client?
How to help them.
Yeah. So web designers became a good niche. That was a niche that I was already in communication with. So we were sort of relying on our, network, because that's kind of what we knew. Like all of our work has come from word of mouth. So that was sort of what we knew how to do. So
of our entire customer base on the SaaS platform, probably 50 to 60% of them are people that we had some sort of relationship with or kind of have become friends with. So we don't have a lot of people who find us organically.
In a way, it kind of reduces some of that customer support issue in a way of we don't really have the same tire kickers. Like we're not dealing with as much of the sort of, high volume of people. In a way, it's almost like we're a personal brand, right? People kind of know of us and they kind of trust what we're able to do.
Hey friends, this is a great time to pause and let you know that Bright and Early is brought to you by Transistor.fm. Transistor offers you professional podcast hosting and analytics. They host this very podcast that you're listening to right now. And my friends, I got to tell you, it could not be easier. I can tell you from personal experience. As you also probably know, podcasting is becoming one of the best ways to develop a closer relationship with your audience. And so if you're thinking about starting a podcast, trust me, look no further. Just visit transistor.fm, and if you decide to sign up, let them know that Brian sent you. It's still so fascinating to me that your services business is fed some leads through your SaaS product and a little bit vice versa even. Is that a long-term goal? Is that the plan at this point? Or how do you view those two separate businesses? So
those kind of came about in an interesting fashion. A lot of our customers on our SaaS are people that we often know personally and have developed relationships with. And some of the, after a year after we launched, we started doing these things to try to generate more leads and more interest. So we started doing a little bit of advertising and added the ability to book demos of the software on the site, because there were a lot of people that were coming to the site and they're like, it sounds great, but can I see it? Can I try it out? Because we do have a free trial, but it's behind a credit card paywall and stuff like that. So people were asking to see the product in action. We didn't have a video at that time, which is, we still need to do really, because we recently took down the demo situation because we're taking it in a different direction now. But early on, we started doing these demos, and what we were finding was that people were coming to the SaaS with this idea that a software product was going to help them launch the course. And from a technical perspective, it does. But the main reason that people were quitting after the trial or paying for a while and then churning was because they showed up to the course with no content.
And no concept sometimes. They didn't even know what they were going to launch. We just need a
course. And so they would immediately sign up for a bunch of different course software and be paying for these things and not do anything with it. And then they would quit. So what we realized was that we were missing this component of sort of this educational component about how challenging it is to ship a course and how much content creation it is. And so from that, a new program started forming that Marie was working on called Run Your Learning Launch. And we started basically when people were really hesitant to sign up, we would do a demo with them. And then some people we would give access to this course called Run Your Learning Launch, which was essentially about how to launch a first MVP version of your course, like super bare bones. might have nothing to do with the software and so on and so forth, but it educates the customer on how to create content, and then we would talk about how you might ship it with our product. And so that started getting more leads and more people signing up because it was helping them actually
create traction.
Get the course content created. So our platform works amazing when people bring an existing
if you got your content ready to go, like, great, we can help you get launched.
Super zippy. You can create and launch a multi-tiered course in a couple hours in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
It's very, very simple. So we had this demo thing going, and that started driving some traffic. And then what we noticed from these demos was that people would come, and honestly, it felt like a therapy session sometimes, because they would get so frustrated about how hard it is for them to ship this course, because they just heard that, you get a course and then the six-figure launches just start rolling in. So what happened was I was doing these very highly technical demos, just showing the software, and I was having to kind of say, like, well, maybe you should try an email course first. It's a lot easier than trying to ship on our platform. And again, we're very transparent with our customers. And so we would tell them stuff like, we don't think a course is right for you. Actually, based on what you're telling me about your business, have you considered trying Mighty Networks?
Or have you considered blogging for a while, or like something,
or an email course or something smaller? So we would often suggest these things that weren't our platform, and maybe even suggest our competitors because they had a thing that fit better with them. We're actually pretty terrible salespeople when you think about it.
I think it is an interesting approach and strategy to over-qualify who's going to get into the product and continue to try to get them to hire something else instead. But if I'm recalling correctly, through some of that insight, though, and you alluded to it a little bit, but Marie, you created like a series of like done for you, done with you, or do it yourself levels of courses. Were those? Did you charge for those to help people get onboarded, or what? How did that come about, and what was the learning behind that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously our biggest learning was just that people weren't really ready, and they were struggling to create the content. And, I had friends of mine who'd been working on their courses. In some cases, I had a friend that had been working on it for 3 years. And it's kind of heartbreaking to see people spend so much time on a course that doesn't really sell, because maybe they just weren't testing it. They weren't putting it out in the market. So I wanted to get more people testing out a kind of rough and ready version earlier. So I think the first version of that I ran, and I pulled some content together. I partnered up with a curriculum designer, someone who I had hired when I was working on my course as well. So she was awesome. And it was really great to get her perspective in terms of adult learning and how to structure it from a more technical standpoint. So I partnered up with her, and we ran it as a mastermind. And so I think it might have been 4 weeks or 6 weeks. And it was, one live call with the two of us, 60 minutes. And then we would also review people's materials. So we had assignments, we had a little bit of content for them to consume. And we ran it just sort of as this, cheerleading group, like, we've got your back. You can, run your questions by us. Let's get you launched in 6 weeks. Forget perfectionism. Let's just get something out there that you can see if anyone is even willing to pay for this. And it was kind of secretly a customer research course, kind of disguised as, running a learning launch. And so once I ran it first, I think I ran it twice as a paid mastermind. Then we turned it into a sort of self-study course. And then we also bundled it with a 1 hour call with me or a 1 hour call with Stacy. And then I think we also gave a little bit of, Google Docs review time that we would do. And that sort of helped people take that first step. And then we built in the sort of, hey, when you're ready, sign up for Doki, right within the material. And that was pretty helpful.
And that feels like even another, that is like a productized service, which seems like a perfect fit for y'all.
Yeah.
And so is there any thought of taking that even further?
That's effectively what we're doing now, I think. And Marie can speak to this, but there was one primary case that we started recognizing the potential for using SaaS as a lead magnet for services, where we had this designer book a demo with me, and he was in the UK, and he said something along the lines of, I've got this client that she's teaching these workshops in person, and she wants to take them online and totally revamp her whole online presence and take it to a global market essentially. And when I went through the software with him, he's like, this is all sounding great and everything. And then he was kind of talking about the client a little bit and talking about like, that maybe the client isn't able to use the software yet. We were not sure what the courses are going to look like. And I said, I'm happy to do a demo for your end client as well. Just, shoot her the demo link. So she booked the call, and we did a separate demo with her. And then she was so confounded with the setting it up and just how she should structure her courses and how do I translate my in-person stuff to online and how does this apply? And so we started seeing these problems where people have this successful in-person workshop aren't sure how that works online. And connecting all the pieces together. So basically I said, well, I think you should book a consulting chat with my partner, Marie. This is what she specializes in, is these services. And you should do a quick chat with her. So we got a paid consult and we did a chat with her. Marie did that chat, and that turned into a road mapping project that I don't recall how much that was.
It was just under 5,000, and it was kind of like a MVP. Let's get your course launched in 3 months. Yep. I think it was.
Okay. So we did a consulting offering, productized roadmap, and so a lot of the times we do these things where we repeat the same thing with a different customer, and then we say, hey, that worked really well. Let's try that again. Let's try to do it again with some tweaks, and that's how we develop these productized offerings. That customer actually turned into, 5 figures of revenue pretty quickly. And then it's been a huge chunk of our revenue in this last year because, we sort of scaled up to meet her demands. And so now she's got a whole sort of academy of courses that we're helping her with, website design. We're talking about there's a whole nother side business that she has that we're now helping her consult on. Mm-hmm. And that was all driven from this demo that we did with her, one of her designers that was helping her with some badges on her website or something like that. So it's always...
So sorry. So what's interesting about this part of y'all's story is, a lot of conventional wisdom will say, one who chases many rabbits catches none kind of thing, and you need to focus and just do one thing well. What would you say to that? And why do you think that you two seem to be operating it pretty well?
I don't think we necessarily chase different rabbits. It's all the same rabbit kind of, but the rabbit is changing directions a lot, and we just kind of follow it. And if it's going in a good direction, then we say, okay, what can we learn about this direction that this rabbit's taking, and then kind of adjust our thinking going forward. So I think a big part of this is that, we started off with this idea of, we're going to build this SaaS. It's going to replace Ben's salary. That was our initial goal setting, was it's going to replace all the revenue that Ben pulls in, and then Marie will continue consulting, and that'll be our next 5 years or something. I think we learned quickly that because we were able to leverage our platform and our expertise into these higher paying consulting projects, and they just felt so easy for us.
Mm-hmm. Consulting, and
it's just so much easier. And I think we kind of made this realization that, we loved working on the product, but we decided we are services people. We like to have that really hands-on deep dive in a project rather than these low touch, if we have 100 clients and we just communicate with them to help them,
customer support,
send them documents or help them resolve bug fixes and things like that. Like it wasn't
as inspiring.
It wasn't as personally satisfying for us than really, really impacting 1 or 2 clients and helping them drive these kind of life-changing businesses.
Yeah, I think there's something to, getting an email from that woman after helping her, build her course business and being like, you have no idea how much this has changed my life. Like, I have time with my husband now. Like, I live for those kind of emails for sure. And I just don't think we felt that kind of impact when it's like a $30 a month software fee versus someone who's paying you a lot more, but there's more at stake and there's more results. I think that's kind of what drives us.
Yeah. So we never got the traction that we thought we did. And so we started looking at ways of how do we transition this into a product? And I think a lot of people have side businesses that are info products, but I don't think too many people have these, side businesses that are SaaSes that work really well for supplementing their income and driving new business to your consulting leads. We have this thing, and I think it's like a Silicon Valley driven outlook of start the side business, then all of a sudden like quit my day job, and now it becomes my full-time business, and then I'm totally free and I have no obligations anymore.
Work on the beach.
Well, I mean, we look at it as such, if you have 200, 300 SaaS clients, you've got 200, 300 people that you have to keep happy. And that's a whole different ballgame. Now you have to talk about
different type of relationships,
scaling to accommodate customer support. And now you're talking 24/7 service. And we're pretty specific about our availability being, business hours only, because we just don't want to grow to that size.
Yeah. And 5 nines of uptime if you're mission critical and all that, all that fun stuff.
It depends on your comfort level for that type of stuff. But we had a very sort of, I would say, delusional view of what this thing would become.
Oh, we were so naive for sure. Yeah. But I don't regret any of it. Like I feel like we both learned so much stuff about the importance of customer research. That all of the stuff that we've learned on the product side now informs what I do in my services and vice versa, right? So I feel like getting a really interesting, well-rounded perspective of what do things look like on the product services, on the services side, what do they look like on the product side, what does it look like for online courses, for masterminds, group programs. So in a way, sort of my specialty became helping people figure out what their product service ecosystems look like, because I had seen so many different versions of it behind the scenes helping people do it. So even though it felt like my attention was kind of disparate and I was like, oh, what do I do? What's the white rabbit? In a way, that's kind of been the thread, is like helping people actually figure out how to build more sustainable revenue. It just took a while to kind of see what that undercurrent was.
Yeah. So, Marie, when I first reached out to you on Twitter to see if you're interested in coming on, I completely had zeroed in because I was curious about y'all's experience building Doki, and then as we kind of chatted, I realized, she's definitely drawn toward and as you just said, you all are services people, and so I'm curious, what Marie, what advice do you have for services people who find themselves dreaming about doing what y'all did and launching a SaaS?
Don't do it. No, I'm just kidding. Certainly my biggest advice would be, I sort of wish we had started on a smaller scale or a smaller scope. I think inherently, like, there were certain challenges that came with something like course creation, where we're selling to the teachers and then they're selling to their students. So there was like multiple levels of tenants, both from like the data side, the payment side. There were just so many complexities that we didn't foresee. There's a part of me that wished we had, instead of trying to, build an all-in-one as a tiny 1-2-man shop, could we have done something that was smaller that solved a really specific problem really, really well? That's the biggest thing I wish that we had done differently.
Yeah, I think go back to your services and look at the problems that you're solving for clients in a way that doesn't exist in the market yet, and some specific thing that you're doing repetitively. And if you're doing mostly services, can you productize that first and sell that as an offering? Because then it'll give you a feeling of what sort of things can be turned into a process. I know that jokingly, I've heard I think it's Patrick McKenzie talks a lot about how if you look at what businesses are doing with Sheets, there's 100 different SaaSes in a Google Sheets document. If they're doing some kind of number crunching or, combining data in some way that's really unique to them, there may be a way to productize that you can create that experience over and over again, and then, productize it and sell that. So one thing we're looking at right now is Marie and I are kind of nuts over this software called Notion, Notion.so. And Marie's kind of, becoming this guru in the market, and people are looking to her right now for how is she structuring information in Notion? What are you doing? How do you get started with it? It's so confusing because it's kind of this super powerful tool that lets you design all your own systems, but it's also very simple in a way. But it's so elegantly simple that it can be a little bit daunting to get started. And so repeatedly, people are just like, Marie, your Notion stuff is so amazing. Tell us your secrets. And so we're seeing more and more people just demanding this. So it seems there's this huge demand before we've created anything really for her to create some sort of info product around Notion or a templatized system that people...
Or if only there were a piece of software where you could create an online course and people could buy it.
Yeah, but that's kind of the joke, is that we think about these things as like let's create an online course. Let's create a software that will allow them to easily create Notion. But it's like, what's the smallest thing we can do to sell?
Yeah.
First off, and that might just be creating a page that has a button on it that's like, pay us $20 and we'll send you a link to our Notion template.
Yeah.
We don't need to go right to solving the hardest problem.
And like building out a sales page and building out a funnel and going nuts over it. It's like, can you, through a conversation with someone, offer them something and they're willing to pay you for it?
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the services thing, I think it's interesting that one thing I see, this happens a lot where as a programmer, for example, the service that I provide is creating custom solutions, websites, applications for my clients. And a lot of programmers will quit their consulting gig in order to build tools for other programmers. But they don't have experience selling tools to other programmers. They have experience selling solutions to clients. Yeah. So I challenge people to look at what do they have experience selling and what are they really good at creating, instead of what do they want to create. Because I think with the courses thing, I wanted to build it because I had the interest in
learning a new tech,
in engineering a product, and it was exciting for me, but I didn't know anything about online courses. We just started doing the research right when I said, we should build something for you, Marie, because she had this experience in putting together online courses with a wish list.
And I think one piece of that we didn't realize was the people who were paying us quite a bit of money to help build their custom backends was not the same audience that was going to sign up for a $29 a month do-it-yourself software. Those were actually two different audiences, and I don't think we realized that when we were putting all this effort into building the product.
Do you have any advice going in the other direction? People who have a extensive background in SaaS, but are looking for a little bit more personal touch and moving over into services.
The enterprise contact us, I think, is really good. A friend of mine told me recently, a couple months back, that there's a kind of a dirty secret in SaaS, and that the majority of most larger SaaS companies actually the revenue actually comes from doing integrations with their SaaS. So they're, these billion-dollar SaaS companies, they may have lots of subscribers, but in a lot of ways, something like Notion, for example, you pay $4 per user. So Marie and I get insane value for, I think it's like $200 a year or something. We use it all day long, every aspect of our business and our lives. We plan everything in there, from what we're eating at lunch to what we're supposed to be working on. So we give them like next to no revenue, right? They have lots of customers, but I'm guessing that the majority of their revenue actually comes from, like, you sign Microsoft for
enterprise
$1 million a year, and then they basically say, here's what we need in the product, and you build that for them.
Yeah. Well, listen, we need to go ahead and wrap up here in just a few minutes. But one last question I'd love to hear from both of you on is that, building your own business, it can be stressful. And so I'm curious if there are any practices that you've found helpful in managing your own stress that you'd like to share.
So many.
Is it stressing you out to narrow it down to just one?
Yeah, I mean, we have so many things that we use. And one thing that we've been obsessed with lately is actually doing this really obsessive meal planning. If you want to see Marie's recipe database in Notion, it's pretty amazing. But we spend multiple hours on Sundays preparing all of the food for the week, and this kind of frees us up to just eat, and we don't have to do any cleaning really.
You're stressing about what to eat, like you just know what you're taking care of.
So,
right?
And it's kind of a metaphor for how we operate in business and life. We do a lot of planning. We probably overplan, to be honest, but it allows us to be a little freer and more fluid in our thinking and allows us to pivot quickly because we make fewer decisions. We're kind of, we wear the same clothes every day pretty much. We live
pretty simple lives,
Yeah. We try to remove decision making from our business and our lives as much as possible, so that when you have that willpower issue, because every decision you make takes a little bit out of you every day, and then you have to rest to be able to recuperate that willpower again. And so, saving yourself from that decision making is really good. So we do a lot of planning. We obsess over our personal agendas for the weeks and how we build those out in Notion. We do
I
a
think
lot
those
of
commitments too, to like working out, right? Like you have certain
tracking.
routines and rituals that just kind of, if you know that you have those habits in place, I know that I work out at this time every day, then the rest becomes easier. It's like you're committing to yourself first, and you're saying, this is what I need to be happy first, plug that into your schedule, and then the rest can kind of, business falls into place around life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. How can listeners find and follow you online?
You can check out our site at weareokidoki.com, or you can check out doki.io. And both of us are pretty active on Twitter, so you can just search Marie Poulin on Twitter and
Ben Borowski. You can find me.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for everything you shared, and appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Thanks for having
great.
us.
Thank you.
All right, it's good to be back after a couple of weeks off. So let's do some closing thoughts. Got my tea here with me, just finished doing the dishes. By the way, shout out to anybody who's doing the dishes and listening right now. Shout out also to anybody in Australia. After the US, Canada, and UK, which I would kind of expect, a fair amount of listeners in Australia. So if you're down there listening, reach out and say hi. Love to get to know you. I really enjoyed that interview. It was great to kind of hear both of their perspectives along the way. And that was interesting, the bit when they were, I forget exactly which Ben or Marie said, that they'd made the mistake before of going all in a little too early, maybe expecting the growth to happen much faster than it did. And it's kind of something I've been thinking a lot about recently. Just the fact that launching, challenging as it is, launching is the easy part. The hard part is gaining traction afterwards, to the point that your business can be sustainable. And so you got to plan for that. And I think that's just an important thing to know, to keep in mind, because we've all experienced how difficult it is just to get something built, to go from nothing to something, and to get it to the point where you feel like it's ready for the world, ready for not only strangers, but people that you know personally and respect, to see a thing, and and make a judgment on it, and whatever that may mean. So as difficult as that is, all the planning and hard work and pushing through, the trough of sorrow, as difficult as that is, it's not. It's just the beginning, and so I thought that was. It was good to hear that from them, and to think about that. And I think their business portfolio, so to speak, is fascinating. How they span services, productized services, info products, and a SaaS product. And I just think that's fascinating of all the ways that you can make money running a business online. That kind of gets it. And they have to get their toe in the water in all of those places. The reason it seems that it's working out, that it's not that they're bucking conventional wisdom or whatever that would say, oh no, you need to focus, that everything for them it's within the same problem, it's within like the same domain and the same customer. And so it's not as if they're offering professional photography services and then a productized service for content marketing and then an info product around UI design and a SaaS for law firms. Right, like that would be scattered and probably destined to fail. They're all within this one encompassing umbrella of helping entrepreneurs to produce rich experiences, digital experiences, and so they have one customer who has who has a different job to be done at that certain point. So I just think that's a pretty fascinating way to think about it. It's also a really smart way to be able to find which of those business types, which of those models you like. I enjoyed talking to them, and I was excited to hear their thoughts because I think I mentioned this in the interview. When I first reached out to Marie, that one of the things she said was, "Hey, I still hope this is interesting. Like we aren't SaaS people, we're services people, and SaaS is just really hard. It's crazy, et cetera, et cetera." And I'm sitting here thinking, well, I'm in the services business, trying to move in the direction of a SaaS product. Not because I dislike services, but because there's just so much about SaaS that's attractive. And so I don't know. I just think it's a interesting thing to imagine, being able to do what they have done, which is to have a successful service offering, a productized service offering, an info product, and a SaaS, and find if is there something about each of those that you can do well. I just think it's important to know where you're good and what you want. Do you want a small number of extremely important clients or a large number of individually less important clients? I mean, in either way, like the client, the customer, is all important, but whether or not the relative importance of a given customer is much different in SaaS versus services. Jason Fried of Basecamp, I'll link to this in the show notes. They had a really fascinating graphic that's like it's just a circle. It's just a bunch of super tiny dots, and so it just looked like a bunch of like several thousand tiny little points. And it was this is our customer base, is what he said. And that's interesting. It spreads your risk, across that entire surface area, as opposed to having a small number of clients where you lose any one, and it has a serious impact on your revenue. And then finally, the lesson learned for them around that they would just have started smaller, that they would have tried to build less and make it less complex. This goes back to episode 1 with Jane Portman, talking about Gal's Law, how any successful complex system had to have begun with a well-functioning simple system. And that has stuck with me as I've continued to do this show, just in thinking about it in my day-to-day work life, that one particular principle from that first episode is something that has come back up for me a number of times. personally and in conversations with people I respect and with other people in this industry. And so it's just another reinforcement there that start smaller than you will be tempted to, do less than you think you have to. But I would love to, as always, I'd love to know what you all think. You can reach out to me. I am B Ray on Twitter. That is Booyah, Radio, Hunky Dory, Excellent, and All Right. And if you would like, you can go to brightandearlypodcast.com, sign up for the newsletter there. You'll get an email from me about every 1 or 2 weeks. I try to do it weekly, but miss a week from time to time. And you'll get thoughts similar to this one, a short little article that you can read over your morning coffee. And listen, if you're enjoying this podcast, it would mean a lot to me right now if you would take just a couple of minutes, scroll down on your phone or wherever you're listening to the podcast and leave a 5-star rating or review. It helps this podcast show up a little bit higher in the search results of where people tend to listen to their podcasts. So that would help out a whole lot. And until next time, I'm Brian Ray.